Welcome back, everybody, to DeadBall TV. Today, we're going to be chatting all about Group C of Asian World Cup qualifying. I got Alex from the Back Four Pod representing Australia today during our conversation, and I guess that means I'm representing the other 5 nations participating and trying to make the 2026 World Cup. I'll do my best here. We're just going to have some generic discussion about the different teams, how everybody's doing, biggest surprise, predictions for who advances directly and then goes through to round 4, what that looks like, and a couple other things that I'll put down below in the description in the form of a timestamp. If you guys like videos about Asian football, make sure you're subscribed and check out Alex's channel, the Back Four Pod. I will have all the links to his channel and social media in the description. Alex, appreciate you coming on. And I want to start with a pretty generic question here that I was thinking about long and hard when I couldn't sleep last night. How screwed do you think some of these teams would be, specifically teams in Group C, if we were on the old qualifying format?
First of all, thanks for having me on. Pleasure as always. Look, I think that Asian football in particular right now, and I think you could agree, particularly the teams in Group C, but I think just Asian football in general is on a bit of a decline. There's a massive gap between sort of the top teams and the bottom teams. And I think that's very self-evident when you look at how teams like Japan and South Korea have sort of just run away with their groups. Look, in regards to the old format, I'm not too sure how much more screwed teams would be because there's just certain teams that I expected to be doing so much better with qualifying that have just done just unbelievably bad. And I guess we'll get to that later when we sort of go over teams that I guess disappointed us, but I might as well just kick it off now because I want to get this off my chest straight away. Saudi Arabia and Qatar in particular are just awful at the moment. Absolutely awful. Saudi Arabia, I did some research on this. Well, it's not hard to do the research on it. You just have to look at the tables. They've scored the least goals in these opening qualifying games out of all 3 groups, out of every single team. That is less than Kyrgyzstan. It's less than Bahrain. It's less than China. It's less than Uzbekistan. Like, I don't know how these are some of the big teams that are supposed to be representing us and Asian football in general. You've got a Saudi Arabia side under Hervé Renard that beat world champions Argentina in the World Cup and now struggle to even score a goal against the most minuscule nations in the region. Thank goodness that we have these favorable conditions with the expanded World Cup, because honestly, I don't know if that's a better thing that we're getting more sides to represent us, or if it's a bad thing that we're going to be having more of these sort of average sides going in and just embarrassing Asian football as a general, in general, should I say.
Yeah, I would say to that point, don't worry, because other teams will be sending nations that will also embarrass their federations. I don't think this is exclusively an Asian thing, but I put in some random group generator using the old format where we just had 2 groups of 6 teams. And these are the groups I got. Group A, again, these are hypothetical. And you're going to like this one because of the first team. Group A would be Iran, Australia, Iraq, Uzbekistan, Jordan, and Oman. Group B would be Japan, South Korea, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Bahrain. Those groups are both unbelievably stacked. And honestly, Australia, bro, I don't know how y'all do in that group. Jordan, Uzbekistan, Iraq, Iran. I don't know. This Australia I've been seeing, I think you guys are in big trouble in that group.
I was going to say, look, as an Australian, I've got plenty of PTSD going up against the likes of Iran and Iraq. And we've struggled to even beat teams like Oman in the past. I wouldn't even be surprised if we didn't even get out of that group with any Socceroos side, to be honest, of the past 10 years. We've been so below par in terms of just Asian qualification and being able to dominate Asian teams, especially, lower grade Asian teams, the likes of Oman, the likes of, at times Iraq, who obviously aren't what they used to be. Look, I think the expanded format is for the better. I do think that having more representatives at a World Cup is always going to be a good thing for Asian football. I just do hope that we're getting the best of the best out there. Obviously, you're going to always have your South Koreas, you're going to have your Japans, you're going to have your, at times you're going to have your Australias and stuff like that. But I'm more concerned on the fact that you do have these, I guess, bigger nations that should be really performing that are just not doing good. You got Saudi Arabia that have only scored, I think is it 4 goals in qualifying, which is absolutely crazy. 4 goals in 8 in 8 qualifying games so far. You've got Qatar, who are on the verge of just going out automatically in their group, which is outrageous to say the
Are
least.
Qatar a big team, though?
Uzbekistan are nice.
Are Qatar a big team? I know they won the Asian Cup twice in a row, but are Qatar really a big team?
No, I think in the context of Asian football, they are, in terms of the fact that they have been probably the most successful Asian team in terms of the Asian Cup within the last, well, they've won the last 2, so you can't really put it against them. But it just seems like every time they actually do need to sort of turn up for a qualifying campaign, they just choke. I don't know what it is. I don't know how Afif and Asmo and Ali can go from being 2 of the most incredible forwards in Asia over the past decade to suddenly, looking like some scrubs that you'd find playing in the amateur divisions of Burundi or something. I don't even know. And I don't know how they do it. I don't know how they do it. It astounds me at this point.
Well, I think it's because Qatar have the worst defense of any team. I think I did a best ranking of Asian players in qualifying so far. I think Akram Afif has been the best player. I think he's been the best individual player in qualifying so far. But when your team concedes 4 goals a game, I mean, what is he supposed to do? Is he supposed to score 5 every single time? If you look at Qatar at the Asian Cup, their defense was very good. I mean, even Iran only got 2 on them. They concede 1 against Jordan in the final. Uzbekistan only get 1. They go to pens against them. They were like never, ever really opening the opportunity for the other team. But now at qualifying, they've like switched to a back 3, and they don't have the personnel for that, and they've been sliced open. So that's an interesting situation with Qatar where I think what they were able to do, not just in the Asian Cup, but in the Arab Cup, they made the final too. And like some teams take that very seriously. It's an amazing achievement for Qatar, but specifically for the teams in Group C, when I look at Saudi Arabia and Australia and them struggling, do you attribute that more to the bigger teams, the giants in Asia overall, but Group C specifically, getting worse? Or do you think that's more Bahrain and Indonesia and even China are either better than we thought or they're improving? If you had to like allocate responsibility to one of those sides, what would you pick?
Look, obviously you can look at that point and say, oh, well, obviously it's a bit of both. You look at the likes of Indonesia, obviously getting their new Dutch imports, Bahrain are overperforming compared to what everyone thought they were going to do. China is on a continuous decline, which as an Asian football fan, I think is lovely to see. But look, I am quite comfortable in the assumption that every single Asian top side, apart from the likes of South Korea and Japan, which are always going to be your big performers, are underperforming. You look at the likes of Qatar sitting outside the automatic qualification spots. You look at the likes of Australia, who lost to Bahrain, couldn't beat Indonesia, drew with Bahrain in a very winnable game that we needed to win. You look at Saudi Arabia, the fact that they can't score goals. You even look at teams like Iran. Look, I know Iran. I know Iran aren't exactly the demon team that they can be at times, but you expect that team to be able to blow opponents away. And I just don't see it nowadays. And I don't know why that is. I think a large amount of that can come down to the fact that, look, some of these smaller nations definitely are getting better. I wouldn't say it's a wide scale thing. I would say there's a very select few. Uzbekistan, I've been calling the rise of Uzbekistan's national team for years now. They always well overperform at youth tournaments, whether that's on an Asian level, whether that's on an international level. They're always overperforming. And I think with a lot of these smaller nations that do have these very good youth structures, whether it's just, they've got good ways of bringing through talents, or they've just got good genetic youngsters or stuff coming through like that, which I think is a large part of the case with Uzbekistan. I think the fact that football is becoming more modernized and globalized, you've got every country now having pretty much widespread access to the internet, global scouting networks for big clubs where they're monitoring these regions in Asia and stuff like that. You look at the rise of someone like Abdul oh my God.
Abdul Kusanov.
Should I just say?
Kusanov.
Look, this is a guy that went from the leagues of Belarus straight to a big club in RC Lens and then went to Man City from there in the space of like 2 years. I think the path to progression is definitely there for a lot of these smaller Asian sides. And look, I understand that lots of people will say, well, if it's happening to teams like Uzbekistan, then why are teams like Indonesia still behind? Why are teams like, Singapore still behind? Why are teams like Malaysia still behind? And you have to look at the reasons to what those are. You look at stuff like Malaysia and the fact that they are constantly just abandoning any hope of developing good youngsters by increasing the cap space for overseas signings. Or you look at the fact that Indonesia don't want to trust their young talents and would prefer to just nationalize half of the Netherlands. There are countries that are actively destroying their own sort of production of these young players. And then there are countries that are looking to harness it, like Uzbekistan. And that's why I think Uzbekistan's getting success, and why some of these big countries like Australia, who aren't working hard enough to nationalize dual nationals. You look at Saudi Arabia and just how sort of uninspiring their entire football system is at the moment. You look at countries like even like Iraq and just how backwards they've become in terms of their national team structure in recent years. It's painful to watch. I think a lot of Asia's big dogs are sort of starting to take the hit. Maybe there's a change of the guard where you're going to see some big nations sort of coming up, maybe like in Indonesia, maybe in Uzbekistan becoming a major player. But honestly, who knows? Too early to tell. I just think the big sides are underperforming at the moment.
Yeah, it's a very interesting discussion that we could talk more and more about. I think specifically for the teams in Group C, you mentioned Indonesia, where I've been very vocal in my disliking of what's happened to the senior national team. I don't think international football is club football. If you want it to be club football, support Real Madrid. If you want to be able to sign anybody, support Manchester City. I do think that the effects long-term we're going to see on development in these countries specifically is what's going to hurt. And the counter to me will be if Indonesia qualified around 4, or if they make the World Cup, which I don't think they will, then people say, oh, Jack, you're an idiot. Like, this is why we're doing it. And it's like, okay, but you're selling the future for the present. You're putting all of your eggs in the basket of just constant recruitment. At some point, you will run out of Dutch players to recruit. If you're Malaysia, at some point, you're not going to have any more Brazilians to naturalize. At some point, your entire 11 is going to be naturalized Brazilians, which I think is an embarrassment to Malaysia. And it's an embarrassment and an offense to the fans, to the kids who have to play in the U17s, U20s, U23s, and they never even get a chance to represent their own national team because the federation is inviting 5 Brazilians to join per window. UAE does this as well. I'm more forgiving for Qatar and UAE doing this because they got 2 million citizens. We're talking about Malaysia and Indonesia here, dude. We're talking about 1.5 billion people. And you got to go to the Netherlands to recruit everybody? At least Indonesia, I think their U20 team had a bit of success recently at the U20 Asian Cup. So there's like a sliver of hope there. Malaysia, dude, I think they're cooked. If Vietnam start going down this road, if Cambodia start doing this, they're screwed. Again, keeping it to Group C, I think Australia will always be strong because you guys seem to always produce athletes and players who are, I'm not even sure it's strong fundamentals, but just like a good understanding of the game. I don't think you have the same technical level of Japanese and Korean prospects, but I don't think Australian youth prospects suck either. I mean, look at you guys winning the U20s most recently for the first time ever, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah. First time we've ever won the Under-20s Asian Cup.
So there we go. So you have some hope and some youth prospects there. You talked about Uzbekistan, how beast mode they are at the youth level. I would say they're the second best youth team behind Japan, and that shouldn't be the case. Teams like Iran and South Korea and Australia and Saudi Arabia should be better than Uzbekistan. Maybe even Iraq have an argument to like, y'all should probably be on Uzbekistan's level at the youth team. But I think that's a testament to Uzbekistan and the organization that they have now, where they're winning U17s, U20s, U23s. They're kind of embarrassing some of the bigger teams. In terms of like Group C, and I'm like jumping back between Group C and all of Asia, Bahrain, I don't know if we can say Bahraini football is on the come up. China in the freaking shadow realm, dude. Like, I don't know when these guys are coming back from the pits of hell. Saudi Arabia, actually very good youth teams. But we're not seeing it translate to the senior team because of the Saudi Pro League. These guys get no minutes. They kind of tap out at age 20. Indonesia, recruitment merchants. Australia, I think you guys will always be solid. And then Japan, who are like the creme de la creme of Asia right now when it comes to development, when it comes to youth teams, when it comes to promotion, when it comes to export. And I just wonder if and when another big team is going to try to copy the Japanese model at least. I don't know. I don't know if you have a take on that.
That's the hard thing I think about trying to copy Japan's model, is because Japan is such sort of like a perfect blend of just everything that you need. The fans are passionate. They have the money. They have the desire. They have the sporting culture. They have everything they need. You know, their players grow up idolizing the game, studying the game. I know that you mentioned earlier that Australia does well at youth tournaments. And to be honest, I truly think that where Australia loses that sort of ability and why it doesn't translate to the senior level is because I truly think that because of our sporting culture, we stop caring about technical development and just try to develop athletes, which is the dumbest shit that I've ever seen. When you turn away from developing technical levels in any sport, you're not going to create any sort of success on an international scale. And we're starting to see this with rugby as well. I have a feeling that the Australian rugby team's getting, less good technically on every pretty much sporting level aside from maybe cricket. We are lowering the bar consistently in terms of technical development. And look, I feel that partially Australia, I think our own sporting codes are to blame. We're relatively closed off from the rest of the world in terms of our sporting leagues. Look at AFL. We're the only country that actually plays it professionally, and that's our national sport. Is there ever going to be a country that copies Japan's model? Probably not. I don't think South Korea will be able to replicate it to the same degree. I don't think Australia will be able to do it either. I think Japan's just always going to be ahead of the curve, to be honest. I don't see any Asian team catching Japan within the next 20, 30 years at all. Japan is just going to be in a consistent state of growth. I can't see a single possible event in which they get knocked off the top of the perch. I can see a country like an Indonesia or a Malaysia getting up there, a Singapore getting up there. I can't see Japan coming down, which is nice that you have the stability, but also at the same time, I'm not Japanese, so it's a bit concerning.
Yeah, understandably so. I think there would have to be a variation on the Japanese model, which is very much export young, oftentimes to Belgium, the Netherlands, or Germany. And that pathway is probably, when it comes to Asian talent, probably already satisfied from the European front. I don't think most European clubs are like, okay, now that we're getting over a bunch of Japanese guys, while we're at it, let's sign 5 Chinese players this window. I don't think anybody's thinking that. So you're going to have to find a different way. Right? What is the Uzbek path currently? Well, it's typically to Russia, or it's to Belarus, or I think the Ukrainian league is another league that is signed multiple Uzbeks. So they're kind of going through like the old Soviet Union, Eastern Europe route. What does it look like for South Korea? What does it look like for Australia? I mean, there are a lot of Australians in the Scottish Prem. There's a lot of Australians in the kind of lower leagues of England. Maybe that's the pathway that exists now, and maybe it just needs to be optimized. Maybe it starts being more to Serie B or Serie A, like some of the smaller teams, and that's where Australians end up. I don't know, but when it comes to development, I do completely agree. Japan is head and shoulders above the rest. But there's work that the other nations could do. I just think they lack the organization of the Japanese FA. I do want to talk about Australia specifically, and I wanted to ask you if you think that this cycle is worse than 2022. And I'm just going to give you the numbers because some people are watching. They're not familiar with how Australia did. I'm going to give you the numbers, and then you can get into this. 2022 cycle, you guys finished with 15 points. In 2026, as of time of recording, you have 13 points with 2 games to go. In 2022, you guys scored 15 goals. So that's nice. 15 points, 15 goals. 2026, how many goals do you guys have right now? Once again, 13 goals scored with 2 games to go. 2022, you guys lost 3 games. This cycle, you have 1 loss to Bahrain with 2 games to go. So the stats say this cycle is better. But what do you think?
Now, I think this cycle has been worse. And I will say the reason I think it's been worse is because off the pitch, there is just way too much going wrong around Australian football. And look, you can say it has nothing to do with the national cycle. I think a lot of people will say that. But I think Australian football is doing a lot wrong at the moment. And I think a lot of those problems are sort of circulating at a really bad time, which is around these qualifiers. Look, obviously you can look to the fact that we played Bahrain twice and couldn't beat them. We drew with Indonesia. We're struggling to get past sides like Saudi. We could have capitalized and beat them, but we didn't. And obviously, that's bad enough. But you also look at the fact that we've had several young players that we've failed to nationalize, the latest of which being Nektarios Triantis and Adrian Segicic. These are 2 young players. They came through the A-League. Segicic just got tied golden boot in the A-League despite being an attacking midfielder. 20 years old, brilliant young talent, was in the Netherlands last year in their 2nd division playing, and he came back to Sydney this year, tore it up. Nektarios Triantis came off a career-best season at Hibs on loan from Sunderland. And we called Nektarios up for our last window where we played Indonesia and China. And you would think, okay, well, you'd give him some minutes here. You'd nationalize him, especially because, these are 2 games that you expect to win quite comfortably. And to be fair, we did win, but we didn't give him any minutes. And now the problem is that he's about to get called up to the Greece national team because we didn't capitalize and we didn't cap him. And I don't see many problems that we faced in 2022. Look, 2022, I could just tell that squad was just not going to do well. And we had a good squad, don't get me wrong. We had a very good squad. I think we had a better squad then than we have now, easily. However, the problem with which is Graham Arnold. Graham Arnold is a terrible national team coach. Great coach at club level. And the reason for that is because he is very loyal and is able to sort of take a project and sort of run with it. When he has a lot of control over a project, he's great. However, with international football, it's so different compared to club management. You don't have that control. You don't have that sort of that guarantee over, how a player is going to perform at their club, what system they're going to play in at their club. Are they going to get injured? Are they going to be in a bad environment? Are they going to be able to develop to a level that you want them to develop to? Are you going to lose a player because they nationalize for another nation or something like that? These are your guarantee. You can't just bring in players as well that are just going to perfectly fit your system. These are things that I think went against Arnold. I don't think he was very adaptable to it. And we saw that for the football he was playing. He was playing very sort of lazy, low, like slow-paced, just terrible football. And one thing that always annoys me is hearing Australian fans say that we did well at the previous World Cup. We did not do well at the previous World Cup. We got incredibly lucky to get through. We scammed our way past Denmark. We got embarrassed by France. And yes, it's France, but the way we were playing was absolutely shambolic. And the fact that we got past Tunisia was dumb luck, absolute dumb luck. So when you look at that and say, was this campaign worse? 100%. Last time we had a better squad. We had more favorable sort of conditions. And look, I'd say the opponents last time are probably easier, if not similar to what we had this time.
Well,
This
you had a
time, though,
Saudi Arabia that was actually competent last time. I think that's the
yeah,
big difference.
yeah. I'm not too sure. Look, I still think last time we had a more favorable sort of setup. This one has been worse, in my opinion. This one's been worse. Um, you look at the fact that you had a Saudi Arabia team now that's just absolute shit. You have Indonesia, who should be nowhere near us in terms of footballing ability, yet we struggled before they even nationalized the likes of Emil Ardero and Joey Pelupessy. Struggling before they even nationalized those guys. And then you have Bahrain, who we couldn't beat twice somehow.
Do you think the
All the
Bahrain
problems
was just
surrounding
bad luck,
Australian
though?
football right now just make it so impossible to have any sort of hope at all. And that's the most painful thing, is that even if we do get through, I know that it is all going to come crashing down. As soon as it goes to a decent point, it's all going to come crashing down because the people on top of the FA are incompetent, just simply
Okay.
incompetent.
I'm going to turn this back on you. If you're saying that you guys got insanely lucky at the last World Cup, I'm saying you guys are very unlucky in this qualifying cycle because Bahrain should not have beat you. Everybody knows there was daylight robbery in the first game in South Melbourne. Bahrain did nothing. It's a wicked deflection off Harry Sutar. No chance Bahrain are the better team in that game. You look at when Saudi Arabia came to play you guys, I think it was Renard's first game. I mean, you guys were by far, it was a terrible match, but you guys were by far the better team, deserved to win. Couple good saves. And I think Saud Abdulhamid has a slide tackle that block. I think it was Riley McGree's shot late in the game. I mean, again, probably should have won that. You look at Bahrain and how they scored. I mean, one of the deflections off, I think it's Cameron Burgess on his head. It's like a back header or something goes wickedly wrong, falls to a Bahraini player, and he just strikes it. I think you guys have been very unlucky this qualifying cycle. And I think if you look at how many points Australia deserved versus how many you have right now, you probably should have 3 more points than you do currently and should be pretty comfortably looking like, all right, lads. I don't know if you guys say lads. Probably not. We're going into the last break. Let's get the draw against Japan. And then we have Saudi Arabia. We get 2 draws, we're in to the World Cup. Or we get 1 win, we're into the World Cup. Instead, it's kind of this more nervy situation where it's like, all right, if we lose to Japan and Saudi Arabia beat Bahrain, oh, baby, like the oven is turned all the way up.
Look, I have a feeling that I'm going to contradict myself in a way, but in football, you do create your own luck. And I know that I complain about the fact that, we didn't play well against the likes of Tunisia and Denmark and that we were lucky. But at the same time, I hate being able to blame losses on luck because realistically, even if we were unlucky, we should have still won those games against Bahrain. There is in no
Yes.
in no timeline, in no universe, in no fabric of existence should Bahrain be getting close to us in a game of football. And I think that's purely down to mismanagement. I don't think that we as a country, or at least Graham Arnold in particular, Tony Popovich has gotten a bit better. But my main complaint of Arnold, and look, I detailed this all in a YouTube video I did called, I think it was called Why the Socceroos Are a National Disgrace or something like that. But I detailed this. Graham Arnold's main flaw as a national team coach is that while he is able to play this sort of, for lack of a better terms, cancer ball against these big teams and be able to scrape out these results, he plays terrible football against these smaller nations. Graham Arnold as a national team coach is solely unable to win a game in which he is not the underdog. And I think Iraq fans are going to find out that firsthand now that he is their national team coach. And I feel very bad for them about that. But you look at those games where, we couldn't score past Bahrain. We couldn't score past Indonesia. We drew with Bahrain again. These are games that you need to be winning. Even if you do get unlucky and, there's a little deflection and that's why we lost. Well, no, because you had 90 minutes to get a goal. You had 90 minutes to create chances and you couldn't do it because your system is flawed. Your attacking structure is not good. Your choices for team selection are just downright wrong. You don't bring up along impact players. There was a solid period for about 3 international windows where Australia didn't call up a single attacking midfielder because Graham Arnold loves to play with a double pivot and didn't want to play with an attacking midfielder at all, which was the dumbest decision when you're going up against teams that are going to defend in a low block. I don't understand how this man kept his job for so long. Thankfully, Popovich is a bit more inspiring with his attacking football, but it's not that much better. We still do struggle. I don't know if it's a mentality thing or if it's just these teams getting better at frustrating these high to mid quality attacking teams. I guess that has something to do with it. But look, I think we have been unlucky this window. I think we have been unlucky. But we completely deserve it because we haven't been capitalizing on the fact that we've had a favorable draw and the fact that Saudi Arabia, who are our main competitors for this, are just not good.
Yeah. I think the main problem, I've gone back and forth with some of my buddies about Graham Arnold and was he a good manager? Was he not? I think some games he got it right. I think some games he got it horribly wrong. And I think what we're seeing as a theme to kind of protect Arnold a little bit, and I think Popovich has probably been a little protected in this wave from the teams you guys have played since he got appointed. I mean, like the draw away in Japan was holy shit. That was the luckiest own goal for Australia I've ever seen in my life. How the ball even hits Taniguchi and bounces in the back of the net. I mean, it's out on YouTube. You can watch my reaction. I was doing a live watch along. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. Like, it looks like there's a remote control device on the ball to put it in. I mean, Australia did nothing, said, I don't want to see the ball. I don't want to touch the ball. We don't want to touch the ball on your side of the pitch. 5-5-0, we're just sitting back, right? And it was enough for you guys to get a 1-1 draw away in Japan, which I think was a big result, even though I think Japan at home is embarrassingly weak for a national team of their strength. They should be destroying teams at home, and they just drop points left and right. I just think we're seeing across Asia, very, very few teams can break down a low block, Australia included, especially Graham Arnold double pivot Australia, where like you're asking Jackson Irvine to be the 10, who I think has been amazing, by the way. I love Jackson Irvine. I might be one of his biggest fans in the world. But you saw it with that like Indonesia away performance where it's like, can we like throw an offensive player out on the field, please? Because Indonesia are just sitting back. They just want the point, and they got it. And that was a pretty bad performance from Australia. I do want to focus in for a second on the next break because we've seen Japan's roster, and just like they did in 2022 when they qualified after 8 games, they're sending up not quite a B team. I think that's a bit too dismissive. It's still going to have Takefusa Kubo. It's still going to have Wataru Endo, the team captain. Suzuki's still going to be in the net, at least for one of the games. He might actually be replaced for the second one to give another guy a rep. But you guys are playing Japan at home, and then Indonesia played Japan away from home. I don't think it's in the Saitama, but it's in Japan. Do you think the fact that Japan's bringing up a rotated squad, do you think that ultimately at the end of the day results in Australia and Indonesia either, being able to lock down either second place or a top 4 and go through to the 4th round?
I will just say my hometown of Perth only got one game from this qualifying campaign. And it was this game against Japan. And I'm so happy for it. And I know for a fact that they're bringing their B team. We're going to have a crowd of about 50,000 at Optus Stadium. It's going to be great. And then we're going to turn up and lose 2-0. But regardless of that, look, in all honesty, I do think Japan's depth is incredibly strong. Obviously, they're the best team in Asia. They're going to have the best depth. And the fact that they've got that many players, even from a B team, playing out in Germany, in Belgium, in France, is just incredible. I think their B team on its own is probably enough to win this group. And I mean that wholeheartedly. Do I think Australia can get past them? I think they can. With a home crowd advantage, I know Japan's support will be very strong because they do carry themselves very well to away games, especially in Australia. But I do think Australia does have an advantage here. You've got Alessandro Cacciati coming back from his ACL injury, which is great timing. Cameron Burgess looks to be fit. Most of the players are coming back to sort of full fitness as well. There are a couple of injuries here and there, namely Jackson Irvine as well, who's going to be missing. But in a way, I feel like that could be a blessing in disguise. I do feel like this is the perfect time to throw in that more attacking option and really go for the kill. If there's one thing I don't want to see Popovich doing, it's sitting back and inviting this pressure, because it is Japan's B team, I know, but they're still quality in attack. You've got the likes of Ritsu Doan. You've got the likes of Ueda up top. There's going to be quality all over the pitch for them. So you can't be affording them time and space to sort of get creative. Go for the kill early, see what you can do. If you want to shut it out after that, absolutely. But you need to have that mentality that, hey, this is our home ground. We need these points. We can do it here. We can qualify for the World Cup if we can get this win here at home. Go for the kill early. That's what I was really hoping that we do against some of these other smaller sides that I just don't think we did to any sort of impressive degree. But under Popovich, I feel like this more sort of cutthroat approach is what is needed. We need to go for the kill against Japan. We need to get that win. Saudi Arabia, I don't want to leave it till that game. While I'm confident we can beat Saudi, especially with the state that they're in now, I don't want to leave it to that because, you know, despite Australia sort of being, I guess, better than most at clutch moments, especially in football, I don't want to test our luck. I really don't want to test our luck against Saudi because I can just see it going horrifically wrong if we do.
Yeah, my friend and I joke that Australia are the bare minimum merchants, that you guys leave it to the last possible second. You love going to round 4 and then beating the UAE and then qualifying that way. And if you guys do go to round 4, I think you qualify. I think you would be one of the stronger teams to end up in that stage. Do you think you finish in second, though? Do you think this team has enough, and given the circumstances?
I think we do. I hate saying that because, you know, I know for a fact that if we don't now, this is going to come back to bite me. And I'm going to be haunted by these words that I'm speaking for the rest of my life. But I think when you look at it realistically, I think we do. The fact that you are playing a weakened Japan side at home, though it is still a good side, this is the best time to play them, essentially. When they've done all they can, they have nothing more to gain. So they can throw out their younger players, throw out their rotation players, let them get the minutes, sure thing. Saudi Arabia, to be our last game, is going to be a huge one. I have a feeling that if we can just get a draw against Japan, it will be enough. I don't see us really losing to Saudi. And I know that might be a bit of a wild claim, considering that they have been a really strong team in the past. But you've got to also remember that this is the lowest scoring team in all 3 groups so far. And while Australia does have a bit of a bozo gene from time to time defensively, I do trust Popovich's defensive structure more than I trust Graham Arnold's. I just think that Popovich is a better tactician and has more sort of structure and better planning in terms of defense, midfield structure, and just attacking in general. So I think across the field, we are stronger. We're getting a lot of our better players back as well from injury, which is nice. Once again, also missing Jackson Irvine, which is going to suck, but gives us a perfect excuse to sort of go on the front foot a bit more. Maybe play someone like a Max Ballard, who's going to be that sort of engine room player, who's going to be getting up and down, controlling the flow of the game. If Nektarios Triantes doesn't decide to nationalize for Greece, perfect opportunity to use him. Big, powerful man in the midfield to break down the play against Japan and Saudi and help us push forward. These are the kinds of games that you need to be winning if you want to be considered a top side in your region. Australia has a real sort of lack of this at the moment. I have a feeling that in general, across the entirety of the FA, there's just a lack of ambition. And I don't want to say that they don't want to get to a good level, because obviously they do want to get to a good level. Everyone wants to get to a good level, but they're not taking the right steps to be able to do that. They're not properly looking at dual nationals to nationalize. They're not selling this project good enough. There's not a good enough structure for young players to come through in Australia. But if we get World Cup qualification here, it could be a really good step. It could be a really, really good step for the country. And I don't want that to be the sole reason why I have hope, because in terms of the football, there's not much to be hopeful about. But I think for the sole reason that Saudi Arabia are as bad as they are, I think that's going to be enough to carry us over, in my belief at least.
Would you consider Australia a top 5 team in Asia right now? Not historically, right now.
Oh, right now. I would say yes. I think that we're probably around that 5-6 range. I'd say, obviously, you look at the likes of Japan, Iran, and South Korea. They clear us easily. So I'm not even putting them in the same conversation. We're probably looking to get somewhere in that 4th, 5th, 6th spot. I'd maybe even make the argument that Uzbekistan are better than us at the moment.
I think there's 2 teams that have an argument to be better. I think
I agree. I think Uzbekistan is definitely one of them. I don't know if Saudi. I don't think I'd put Saudi in that conversation.
No, absolutely not. No, Saudi Arabia probably 9th right now. Qatar's probably 10th. I think the only other 2 teams that push Australia potentially out of the top 5 is Uzbekistan, which I feel like will be the kind of consensus. My concern with Uzbekistan is they don't beat anybody good. They just get repeated good draws against Iran. And Jordan, I think, is the other team that has a very strong shout as of time of recording to be better than Australia. And I think they have the CV to back it up. Asian Cup finalists. They've beaten much better teams than Australia have been able to beat recently. And I hope that Jordan are able to capitalize and go to the World Cup because they have an amazing generation that needs to make it there. I'm not really sure how their youth players are looking, but I think those are the 2 main competitions. Like if we did this NBA style, like Australia versus Jordan, Australia versus Uzbekistan, best of 7.
Yeah.
I mean, I kind of think just by who Australia is, both games would go to 7. But I back Jordan, who have been giant slayers for years now, and Uzbekistan. They just seem like they're finally starting to believe in themselves a little bit as a national team. They're kind of like trying to shed the Asian bottle job narrative, which I feel like has always been harsh, but it is true. They've never been to the World Cup. Those are kind of the main competition that I see for you guys right now. I do want to ask what you think has been the biggest surprise overall in Group C. You can go a player, you can go a decision to sack a manager, you can go a goal that happened. What would you say is the biggest surprise?
In terms of a team, I would say Bahrain. Look, they're uninspiring in terms of their football. They're very sort of gritty. They grind out results. There's always going to be that one team that sort of just has to ruin it for everyone. But Bahrain, I think, have been that team. The main surprise for me has been Indonesia's whole adoption of this nationalization thing, like really sort of pushing it forward. And look, I know this has been happening for a long time now, and it's probably going to be the way that things are going to go for a long time now. But sacking your very successful manager, who's done a lot for football in your country, to bring in Patrick Kluivert, who's not really had the most success as a head manager and was recently managing in Turkey at a mid-table club, and then nationalizing a bunch of Dutch internationals who you then didn't play in your must-win game against Australia. I don't know what to think of Indonesian football at the moment. It's an absolute mess. Southeast Asian football in general is just an absolute mess at the moment. It's going incredibly downhill. They're sacrificing the success of their own youth teams and youth prospects for the sake of bringing in washed has-beens from South America. And it's incredibly depressing to watch. Look, I remember when the A-League was like that at a certain time. And to be honest, in some degrees, it still is. But at least we're getting to the point where we're able to develop a lot of good Australian talents to then send over to Europe. I'm expecting at least, 10, 12, 15 Australian youngsters to be going over to Europe from the A-League this season, which is great. But Indonesia and Indonesia and Malaysia and Singapore are just going to be so behind the curve if they keep doing this. So I'd say that's probably my biggest surprise, the fact that no one in Indonesia has really woken up and said, wait, why the hell are we actually doing this?
Yeah, it's like a guy who starts taking steroids and then puts on a lot of muscle. As soon as you stop taking steroids, you're going to go back to what you used to look like. And that is what the foreign players are for Indonesia and Malaysia, and even Vietnam are starting to do it. I didn't know Singapore were also doing this as well, but that's depressing. I know Hong Kong have done it. I mean, they're a goddamn city. So at least, again, in that respect, I'm like, okay, I understand why Hong Kong has to naturalize a striker. But Indonesia, again, a football-crazed nation, if freaking Uruguay with 3 million people can become a footballing powerhouse and you with 1 billion can't produce 11 players with the footballing culture, because what's the biggest excuse for India and China? Oh, yeah, they have big populations, but they don't care. Is anyone going to tell me Indonesia doesn't care about football? They have the culture, and they can't make 11 players. They have one dude in the starting 11 who was born in Indonesia. And I don't even know if they're going to replace Marcelino one day. It's not unthinkable. So what are we doing here? Like, what is the point? I feel like they've like snatched the soul out of the game almost, and they're just trying to win at all costs. And it's like, well, that's not really what it's about. It's also about the journey and how you got here. That's what makes it the most special, right? That's why when Crystal Palace win a cup, it means a lot because of everything they had to go through versus Manchester City win the cup. Nobody cares. They spent $600 million or $1 billion in the last 10 years. It's not the same. And I feel like that's what Indonesia's going down. Anyways, that's not my biggest surprise. I have several biggest surprises. One of my biggest surprises is that China, despite being ass cheeks, won 2 games. Like that, dude, Alex, do you understand how insane that is? China have won 2 games.
I don't know how we've got to this point that China has won more games than Bahrain, but is somehow lower than them on the table. I did not expect this at all, to be honest. I can't tell what's more surprising. If you told me like 6-7 years ago, when Oscar had just gone to the Chinese Super League and it was sort of pumping all this and everything looked on the up, that China would be one of the worst sides in Asian qualifiers and would be on the level of teams like Oman, I would have called you crazy.
Oh, they're worse than Oman, dude. They're worse
definitely,
than Oman, 100%.
Definitely. But it's just crazy to think that this nation of over 1 billion people can't, for the life of them, produce 11 footballers. And when they do need good footballers, they are signing washed-up has-beens from Brazil. I don't get this fetish that these struggling Asian football countries have with signing washed-up Brazilians. When has it ever worked for anyone? Ever. And it has never worked. It never will work.
I don't know if we need to go down this road because I know we don't have too much time left, but like I'm also thinking from the fan perspective, right? If I'm a Guangzhou Tigers fan and I'm going to the game, I like to think that I'd want to see our best players be mainly Chinese. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. But like if our entire attack is Brazilians, I feel like that means less. Again, it's like, what the fuck are we doing here? I just feel like we're completely destroying like the fabric of what footy is supposed to be. And maybe it's trophy chasing. Maybe that's killed the game. Maybe it's just owners who want to buy success because they're egomaniacs and they feel like they can only do that with foreigners. Probably everything. But God damn it, China have 2 wins in this qualifying and they are terrible, dude. And if they pick up a third and end on 10 points, massive dub. I don't care if they get eliminated in last. If they have 9 points at the end of this cycle, huge dub for the Chinese national team. Because if I was their manager, I'd be playing the children already. And I would have done it after match day 2. I'd have been like, U20 team, get out there, do what you can. Let's try to get some draws. And instead, they've actually won a couple. Dude, they beat Bahrain away. Like, oh my God, that's a crazy result. I know Indonesia beating Saudi Arabia at home was a crazy result, but like China beat Bahrain away with nothing. Absolutely insane.
The fact that China beat Bahrain away and we didn't just hurts. It hurts so bad.
Dude, it should hurt. It should hurt. And we'll see if the Saudis can do it because the Saudis are next up to visit Bahrain. I think if Bahrain wins that game, they qualified to round 4. It's all going to come down to that, in my opinion. Another surprise for you. How much better Japan have looked this cycle compared to last? I read out the stats for you for Australia earlier. So I'm going to compare the numbers in this cycle to 2022 for Japan. Last cycle, they scored 12 goals. This cycle, with 2 games left, they have 24. Last cycle, they allowed 4 goals. This cycle, with 2 games to go, they've allowed 2. Last cycle, they lost 2 games. This cycle, they've lost 0 with 2 games to go. And then, of course, you have the actual performances where I watched every single Asian qualifier last cycle. There was a couple games, especially the Saudi games for Japan, where away in Riyadh, they struggled a lot. Like, it was a really, really tough game. When they lost to Oman and Muscat, it was just dead ass footy. Like, Japan were pretty mid. In this cycle, they're just destroying everybody. And I know they drew against Saudi Arabia. I mean, they missed 4 chances in that game, and they were already qualified, so they didn't even care. Australia as well. That was probably their worst game, actually, was when you guys came to town. I feel like they just Japan just kind of jogged. They were like, all right, well, I mean, we're gonna try, but not too hard. And they had a couple good chances. But it is what it is. Keeper Gauchi for Australia, I thought, had a pretty good game that match. Outside of that, they're like annihilating teams. When they went away to Saudi Arabia, got their first win ever. So I'm not surprised that Japan, my biggest surprise isn't Japan are top of the group. My biggest surprise isn't Japan are good. My biggest surprise is, holy shit, they've doubled how good they are, and nobody else has really improved at all. If anything, everybody's gotten worse except Indonesia in the group.
Japan are outrageously good. Look, this was a surprise to me, not because I had questions over how good they were. Like you said, every team here has just been so bad. Japan are just another level compared to everyone else here. Look, maybe if you put Japan up against the likes of, Iran, if you put them up against the likes of Uzbekistan, South Korea, maybe they have a few more problems, but I still think they get through comfortably. They look so well organized on the pitch. Off the pitch, the structure is just a dream to watch. And look, this is a side that I think relatively struggled in the Asian Cup. I think it's fair to say they did not look good in the Asian Cup, in my opinion, and they've turned it around. Fair play to them. They go on the pitch and they dominate sides, whether it's qualifiers, big teams, small teams, they dominate. So I'm hopeful that we can get another good performance out of them at the World Cup, because I think that majority of the hopes of Asian football right now are probably resting on Japan, because I don't expect that anyone else is really going to offer up anything, especially South Korea, now that Heung-min Son is about 47 years of age. But Japan are always going to be that team that's sort of there for us to help boost our reputation. We watch everyone sort of say that, Asian football's trash, and then Japan beats some big European team, and then everyone all of a sudden gives a shit about Asian football again. So it's the gift that keeps on giving, really, the Japanese national team. They're never going to be shit. I think their success in Asia is just going to be dictated by how shit every other team is. But they will always be at that sort of consistent level where they're just performing well. And look, if anyone is ever going to catch them, they'll have to be pretty damn good. Pretty damn good.
Do you think Saudi Arabia or Australia have been more disappointing in this qualifying cycle?
Saudi Arabia, 100%. 100% Saudi Arabia. Look, I didn't expect them to be that great, or even a fraction of what they were in the 2022 World Cup. But when you do get Hervé Renard back, and you look at the fact that they've only scored 4 goals in 8 games in a group containing China, Bahrain, Indonesia. Yes, there's teams there that defend in low blocks and make it frustrating to score. But you've got guys like Al Delsari. You've got some good forwards there. You've got good midfielders there. You've got good fullbacks that can create chances. I don't understand why this team is so inept at chance creation and just finishing. Just finishing is awful on every degree, in every sense of the word. Australia, yes, we're disappointing, but we're always disappointing. We're always that team that has the potential to do well, but just doesn't do it for one way or another. And I expected this, because we kept Graham Arnold on, and then we sacked him, said we were doing a worldwide search for a manager, and ended it with Tony Popovich. So I knew this was going to be disappointing. But the fact that Saudi, I'm genuinely comfortable with the feeling of us going away to Saudi and potentially having to win to make the Asian Cup. The fact that I'm even comfortable with that just goes to show how just abysmal this Saudi side is.
I 100% agree. My third biggest surprise was how little improvement I've seen in Saudi Arabia since replacing Mancini with Hervé Renard specifically. And I did a video on the channel. It was a tier list, and it was ranking how much I thought it was justified that Asian managers were replaced during qualifying. Graham Arnold didn't qualify because he wasn't technically sacked, but I probably would have put him in like the 50-50 tier, where it's like, okay, I mean, You can maybe chalk up some of the results to unlucky, but whatever. Don't need to go down that road. I put Mancini in the 50-50 as well. And I think it's interesting because at the time when Mancini was sacked, right, he's walking down the tunnel at the Asian Cup. The penalty shootout's not even over. He seems like he doesn't give a shit about Saudi Arabia. You're bringing back Hervé Renard, maybe not the best, definitely not the best manager in Saudi history, but for the current generation, he is a national hero for what he did at the World Cup. And you bring him back, and I genuinely can't tell. I don't know what's different. I mean, I'm looking at some of the results that Renard has gotten in charge of Saudi Arabia. I'll say it like this. Was it impossible for Roberto Mancini to go away to Australia and get a 0-0 draw? No, I don't think it was impossible for him to do that. Was it impossible for Roberto Mancini to beat China, 10-men China, 1-0 at home? No, I don't think it was impossible. I guarantee you Mancini scores more than one goal in that game. Does Roberto Mancini lose to Indonesia 2-0, the best victory in the history of the Indonesian national team? Does Roberto Mancini lose that game 2-0? Hell no, he doesn't. I don't even think they lose.
No.
I think they might win if Mancini's the manager. I was very much, okay, I get it. Maybe Mancini's toxic. Maybe he doesn't care. You got to get in a guy to rally the troops. Let's bring back Renard. I was there for it. But what I'm seeing as a Renard fan, I love Hervé Renard. He's not doing a good job at all with this Saudi team. Dude, he took an A team to the Gulf Cup, and he got trounced by Bahrain and Oman with the A team. It's really peak scary hours for Saudi Arabia right now because they've already made the managerial change. What are you going to do? Sack Renard? You're going to have 3 coaches in round 3? Get somebody else for round 4? They're out of options, and they look this mid. That is surprising to me. I never expected them to win the group. I never expected them to do the double on Australia. But I expected a response from Renard being appointed. I haven't seen a damn thing.
I genuinely believe, and someone can clip this if you want, and you can show me it in 4 years. I'm making a prediction now that for the next World Cup cycle in 4 years' time, Saudi Arabia will get knocked out in the groups. They won't even make the World Cup. They won't make top 2 and get through automatically. They won't make 3rd, 4th, get through to the qualifying round. They will finish 5th or 6th and get knocked out of their group. I don't care who's in the group. I don't give a crap if it's an easy group. They will get knocked out. And the reason for that is you've got good players in there that are getting older. They're not getting younger. You can't find a good, solid coach that's able to look. Hervé Renard and Roberto Mancini, great. You can offer a good coach all the money you want, but when you have a football system that is actively beating down young Saudi players for the place for the reason of bringing in these 34, 35-year-old Europeans that are going to come and earn, millions of dollars a year, when you're actively trying to take everything Saudi away from Saudi Arabian football, you're actively just sabotaging your national team. And I don't know why exactly they're doing this, because it's not like the Saudi Pro League does well. You look at games outside of, the big 4 of Al Hilal, Al Ittihad, Al Nasser, Al Ali. You look outside of any of those teams at the attendances you get at games for Al Ittifaq. When they had Steven Gerrard there, they had a game where they got 900 fans to a game. And the kind of money that they're spending on players. They had Genie Wijnaldum. They had some decent players in that squad. Steven Gerrard as manager, and you're getting 900 fans to a game. Saudi Arabian football is dead. It is dead and buried. It is on a downward slope. And look, you can build up this national league as much as you want. There is never going to be a single good Saudi Arabian youngster that is produced out of playing in this just disgusting format. We saw it with the Chinese Super League. It's going to be the same thing with Saudi Arabia. There will not be a single good player produced. There will not be a single good thing for the growth of football in the country outside of the fact that people want to go and watch Ronaldo.
I agree with you if they continue on this path. And I'm very curious if if Saudi Arabia, I think what we need to see is a couple things for Saudi Arabia to change. Number one, they have to get embarrassed. And that embarrassment could come by being directly eliminated this round of qualifying. I don't think they're going to finish outside of the top 4. But when they go to round 4, if they pull an Iraq and a UAE in that group of 3, dude, RIP. I think they're done there. So I think that would qualify as a massive embarrassment. And I think it also needs to happen in a major tournament. The next Asian Cup is in Saudi Arabia. They're the hosts. If they get bounced in like the round, they won't get grouped. But if they get bounced in like the round of 16 at the Asian Cup or the quarterfinal in humiliating fashion, then I think we're waiting for just one more tiny spark before I would expect somebody at the Saudi FA to say, enough is enough. This is not working. We have to change. That is if the national team is a priority. If they just want soft power clout from the Saudi Pro League, your prediction is correct and they're screwed for all eternity. But I like to think at some point they will prioritize their own people again and they'll make changes. I want to switch gears very quickly to some positives, things that have impressed you. What's your biggest impression? I mean, thing that has impressed you in Group C so far? I got one that you're gonna like, but I want to hear yours.
I'll be honest. There's not a lot that's impressed me, to be honest. Look, in all honesty, you can look at Japan and just say like, wow, what a football team, man. Honestly, they're a joy to watch. I don't know what more I can say about Japan other than, if I say any more about Japan, then people are going to tell me that it's top tier glazing. But they're a crazy team. They're an outrageous team to have representing Asian football, and it's an absolute joy. If I have to pick anything particularly good out of Group C, you know what? I will say I am happy with the emergence of some of the younger Australian players that we're getting. I feel like Popovic has done a good job of bringing in these younger players. I think this cycle's been really good for the progression of Australian football in terms of the younger players that we brought in. You look at the likes of Nishan Velupale having his national team debut, Ryan Teague, Alessandro Cacciati, Hayden Matthews. Look, there's plenty of other players throughout this campaign that have refound, their form that they really needed to. Lewis Miller is another one who was on really bad form for the national team, but he's bounced back really, really well. There's plenty of sort of signs that you can point to and say, like, look, while it may be shit right now, there are at least bright signs going forward. You do have these young players that are coming in. They're doing a good job. They're holding their own. And yes, it might be against teams like Indonesia, China, Bahrain, but still, these are the kinds of teams that you do need your young, exciting players to be showing promise against. And the fact that some of our better players this campaign have been our younger players, I think is at least a good indicator that maybe football in this country isn't as backwards as I think it is sometimes. Even though I still do believe it's incredibly backwards, it is nice to know that there's at least something to look forward to. Indonesia, I do like some of the young players that they're producing. Marcelinho, quality. I can only say it's a matter of time before he kicks on. I know he's not really getting minutes at Oxford. He needs a good loan move somewhere, but he just looks like a really exciting player who I think could do a really good job if he gets proper minutes and proper trust. So hopefully someone picks him up and he does well. In terms of the other national teams, not really much. I like seeing Bahrain's little underdog story. If they somehow make it through to the World Cup, I think that'd probably be the best thing to have come out of the group.
That would be an insane dub if Bahrain made the World Cup. Holy hell. That would be insane. You kind of stole my thunder. The thing that I'm most impressed with is Lewis Miller specifically and his redemption arc. Because I remember watching this guy at the Asian Cup and before, and I was like, dude, this guy is not good. This guy does not have what it takes. Why is Australia playing this guy? I'm not going to say he was a bum, but maybe that word, I floated it around.
No, you can say it, bro. You can say it. The guy was a bum. He was a bum.
Okay, I was trying to keep it classy, but he was a bum. And I think it's fair to say he's been your best player in qualifying. Is that fair 100%. To say? Okay. 100%. It's him or Jackson Irvine. Everybody else, I don't think they qualify. Irvine's a
I'd have
dog,
to
man. That
agree.
guy.
I'd have to agree.
That's
Look,
a-
here's the thing: is that like I was calling for this guy to be taken out of the national team for so long, and then seeing him drop great performance after great performance, I'm just like, oh man, does my ball knowledge really suck that bad? But I don't think it does because everyone else also wanted him out. So maybe he's just doing this to fucking spite me. But you know what? I'm happy to see it. He's a good guy. I've listened to his interviews and stuff that he's done. He seems like a quality guy. I'm just happy to see him back to his best. If he's back to his best, it gives me hope that some of our other players that are off form can also get back to theirs. So why the hell not?
Yeah, it's like he learned how to go forward all of a sudden. That was like a huge criticism. I was like, bro, this guy cannot attack at all. Like he has zero crossing ability whatsoever. And now with, Graham Arnold and the fact that you guys don't exactly have a bunch of cams and beast mode wingers walking around, he's one of the most dangerous outlets in the team now, which I would never have bet on that happening before qualifying started. I want to ask one last question here and then we'll wrap up. Where would you rank Group C amongst the three groups in qualifying in terms of strength? Strength and difficulty, if you want to say that.
In terms of difficulty, oh God. Oh shit. This is a tough one. Okay. In terms of the group being tight, if you take Japan out of this group, I would say it's number one. If you take Japan out of the group, because Japan is still in the group. I'd probably say maybe second. I think look, when you look at a group that has the likes of Saudi Arabia, Uzbekistan, even a Qatar team that's heavily underperforming, I still think Group A is probably the best group. Group B, Group B is all right. I mean, look, I think Group C has been heavily enjoyable to watch, and that's for the simple fact that I think it's been incredibly tight. And look, even going into the last two game days, it really is like anyone's game. Obviously, you got Japan who have just blown every team here out of the water, but it really is anyone's game, which I think is enjoyable. In terms of the actual quality of the football, we might actually be last. I can't lie. It's not been good. I think Japan have been the only good team in this. You know what? Yeah, I am going to make that call. Group C, I think, has been the worst group. I think in terms of actual quality, it's been the worst group. But in terms of entertainment, I would say it's probably second. I just like Uzbekistan, so when they do well, I'm entertained.
I think it depends on how you want to define this. I was trying to make the bull argument for Group C being the best, and the argument is literally the badges on the shirt of the different teams. It's you look at face value, from a bird's eye view, and you say, oh, that group has Japan, Saudi Arabia, and Australia. That group's insane. But anything else, any other context added, you're like, oh, actually, I don't know about this. You look at teams like, we'll go to Group B first. I think Group B has the most talent evenly dispersed throughout, where it's like, I'm going to be so real. If Palestine were in Group C instead of China, I think Bahrain would be in trouble. I think Indonesia would be in trouble. And I think they probably would have stolen a game from the Saudis too. I mean, that is a terrifying pot five that I think the Group C teams are fortunate did get in here. And even Kuwait, man, they've been dogs. I thought they were going to get ran over, and they're actually pretty solid.
They've been really good. They've been really good for some reason. I don't know why.
Really freaking good. I know Iraq have been like uninspiring, but they still have one of the best defenses in Asia. You look at Jordan, who seemed to consistently play up. So if they were in this group, I mean, that first off, that would have been freaking Hollywood if Jordan was playing Japan, Australia, and Saudi Arabia. Like, goddamn, they already beat Saudi Arabia once in round two. They beat them in Saudi Arabia on the final match day. So they've already proven that they can take them down. Group A, the two big dogs in Group A are untouchable almost. Iran and Uzbekistan. They've just been head and shoulders better than everybody else. You have UAE, who I think are like the most mid team in Asia, but like in a good sense. Like they can make it difficult for every single team in Asia, but they rarely take them down. And then you have Qatar, who are the Asian champions. And I know they've been dog shit, but like they still score a ton of goals and they can upset you. They're the only team to beat Uzbekistan. So you got to give them credit for that. And then you have Kyrgyzstan, North Korea. That gets a little weak. So if you want to put Group C above Group A, I don't know. I think it might be the worst group. The more I think about it, I think it might be the worst group because they also have China, who are the worst team in round 3. I know people say, well, they have 2 wins, and North Korea. I genuinely think North Korea are better than China. I actually think that. I'll fight anybody about that in the comments. North Korea are giving everybody games.
I don't even think you're wrong there, to be honest.
Kyrgyzstan, that's an interesting one because they're terrible away from home. But when you visit Bishkek, man, they're going to take you down. So, like, that's a really scary team, kind of like for circumstances. It's like the Bolivia boost, how they bring everybody to the altitude and then they beat amazing teams because of the altitude. Bishkek's kind of that for Kyrgyzstan. China have, like, great fans, but they're not winning a ton of games at home. I know they did beat Indonesia, but I think Kyrgyzstan could beat Indonesia at home too. So, yeah, I guess we're saying Group C is the worst.
I'd say so. I agree with you and say, like, in saying at the start of the groups, when you look at it at face value and you see the likes of Japan, Saudi Arabia, Australia, even the likes of Indonesia, you say, oh, wow, it's a tough group. And then you look at how shit everyone's been apart from Japan. You're like, okay, well, maybe not. Maybe not.
Yeah. Do you think Group A or B is better? If we're going C is the bottom.
I'm going to say Group A. I'm going to say Group A. And look, I've loved Group B. I think that, you know, Jordan are on the up. They're great to watch. The whole group's just been really good to watch, to be honest. The likes of Kuwait, Palestine. I just think watching Uzbekistan this whole tournament's just been great. I just love the rise of Uzbekistani football. South Korea has been really good. Well, maybe not really good, but they've been South Korea. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Look, you can definitely make the argument that Group B has been better. I think both groups have been great. Group C has been an absolute nightmare. I never want to see any of these teams ever again.
Dude, if we get another Japan, Saudi, Australia qualifying group,
God. I can't do it. I can't do this anymore. I can't do this shit anymore, man.
Dude, what are the odds that we keep getting this repeatedly? It just blows my mind. I read you some of the theoretical groups we would have gotten if we were still in the old format. I mean, I'll say them again. Iran, Australia, Iraq, Uzbekistan, Jordan, Oman as a group. I mean, that's like peak Asian football. That is like, if you do not sit down and watch every single one of these games, you're an idiot. Because Iran, Australia,
you would have done some crazy entertaining games. Absolutely beautiful games, but instead I'm having to sit through Bahrain's just dog shit style of football. I'm having to watch China. I'm having to watch Indonesia try and just formulate a single just style of play wherever they can, and they still can't do it. Saudi Arabia are just the most boring thing I've ever. I think I would genuinely rather just sit in a box. I would rather sit in a box and do nothing but just listen to 24 hours worth of lo-fi YouTube beats than watch one Saudi Arabia game. That is how boring that national team is, and I can't take it anymore. I am dreading going having to watch the away game against Saudi Arabia, not because I'm nervous about the result, but because I have to sit through another 90 minutes of Saudi Arabian football, and I can't do it. I don't want to see them in our group next time. If we have them in our group next time, I'm moving country. I don't care. I'll move to the Maldives. I'll forget about football.
There's a strong argument that Saudi Arabia, Australia 0-0 is the worst game of qualifying so far. Like, not a damn thing happened until like the 85th minute. It was so bro, boring. I was an idiot because I was like, Renard's back. Like, this is going to be interesting. I think I had like I think I had like a 1-1 or like Australia wins it 2-1, something like that. Bro, we had like 3 shots on target. Again, all at the end of the game, all to Australia. Didn't score. And I was like, that was awful. Like, imagine paying money to go see this game as an Australian fan. I'd be furious. I'd be like, are you kidding me? This is how we're going to play? No. Give me my money back. It was awful.
Just this whole campaign's just sucked the life out of me as an Australian fan. To be fair, this national team always does when we fail to beat these minnow teams in Asia, but something about 0-0 draws with Saudi Arabia on a school night just they have a way of taking it out of you as a football fan. Yeah. They really do.
Oh, I did 100%. I could see that. I think last time, I know Saudi Arabia beat you guys 1-0 away off a penalty. I don't remember if the game was dead. Do you remember if it was a good game, or was it just typical when these two sides meet up, nothing happened?
I can't remember a single good game we've played against Saudi Arabia ever in existence.
Okay.
I don't know what it is. I think Australia and Saudi Arabia are like the yin and yang of just boring football. They are just destined for eternity to just have the most dog shit, disgusting, boring games you have ever seen. If I watch a Saudi Arabia and Australia game and there is more than 3 goals, success. I'm a happy man.
Oh my God.
I don't care if we lose 3-0. At least something happened. At least something happened.
3 goals. 3 goals is insane. Give me a goal. I just want to see a goal from open play and like massive dub. I think we're uncovering Australia, Saudi Arabia is the worst fixture in Asian football.
Yeah,
hands down. I think it's the worst fixture.
You know what it is like. You know what it is like. You remember that old Nike ad? That old Nike ad where they replaced all the footballers with robots, and football was so perfect that it became boring because no one would make any mistakes. No one would try any shit like that. No one would do anything. That is Australia versus Saudi Arabia. It is just 90 minutes of sideways passing and just slow and methodical bullshit that just never goes anywhere. Every single time without fail. And it is the most mind-numbing. If there's people at home that think Pep Guardiola plays boring football with Man City, I dare you to sit through an Australia versus Saudi Arabia game. Your life will never be the same. You will be thanking Pep Guardiola for the blessings that he has brought to this world, because you have never sat through anything so disgusting in your entire life, I promise you.
I think it's what happens when you put 22 guys who are on a similar athleticism level and technical ability, and you're like, all right, guys, get out there and play. It's just like a bunch of bruisers, and because the Saudis are athletic and they're like bigger guys as well. And Australians, I think you guys are the best athletes in Asia. And it's like playing rock, paper, scissors, and everyone's just doing rock over and over and over again. And I'm like, can somebody try paper? Can somebody do a scissors and just fucking lose? I mean, like, I'm so sick of this shit. Yeah. It's easily the worst. It might be the worst fixture in international football, actually. Like, the more we talk about this, I'm never doing a live stream again for Australia versus Saudi Arabia. I'm not getting that time back. Hey, Alex, any last things you want to talk about? I got about maybe a couple minutes here at most.
Nah, I think we've covered pretty much everything, but just wanted to say once again, thank you so much for having me on. It's been an absolute pleasure, should I say, to discuss all my thoughts on Asian football at the moment, because look, as much as I love the surprises and the good games that it can give us, there's just as much painful crap that you have to sit through, especially as an Australia fan or an Australian citizen or resident or just Australian football enjoyer, should I say. But yeah, it's been a real pleasure. And hopefully if Australia do make it through and you need me to give you my expertise, I can come back on sometime.
Yeah, 100%. Would love to have you back. Maybe for if not a specific Australia chat, then we could just talk about, Group C biggest takeaways once it's done after the next window, or, when qualification's over. Because I'm curious, we didn't get time to talk about this, but I'm curious, whichever teams Group C sends to the 4th round, whichever teams those are, I kind of think they're in trouble. But we'll just have to wait and see how the cookie crumbles, and we'll have you back. Guys, we hope you enjoyed this episode talking all about Group C and Asian World Cup qualifying. If you enjoyed the video and you're watching on YouTube, make sure you smash the like button, hit subscribe for more AFC content here on DeadBall TV, and make sure you check out Alex and the Back 4 Pod. Again, all links will be in the description of this video. And finally, if you're listening on streaming platforms, please give the podcast a 5-star rating. We appreciate you guys for watching or listening, and we will see y'all in the next one.